Hello, and welcome to my presentation on the social determinants of health and their impact on the elderly. The objectives we're going to cover in this presentation are what are the social determinants of health, and how do those social determinants of health impact our overall health status? How do social determinants of health impact the elderly? And then lastly, which specific social determinants of health impact the nutritional status of the elderly? Social determinants of health are the condition in the environments where people are born, live, learn, work, play, worship, and age that affect a wide range of health, functioning, and quality of life outcomes and risks. So some example of these things would be safe housing, transportation and neighborhoods, racism, discrimination, and violence, education and job opportunities. Those two really go hand in hand. Access to nutritional foods and opportunities for physical activity, polluted air and water, and educational opportunities. So these are some of the social determinants of health that impact a person's health and well-being. Social determinants of health impacting overall health status, as we mentioned on the previous slide, unsafe neighborhoods leading to violence impacting the physical and mental well-being of an individual. You know, if you are a victim of violence that has occurred in an unsafe neighborhood, you're not only going to have the impact to your health from whatever violent act occurred to you, but then if you are in an unsafe neighborhood where violence is a potential, you also have the impact on your mental health because of the worry and the concern and how that can lead to anxiety and depression. So an unsafe neighborhood with violence can impact your health both physically and mentally. Poor access to education, limiting ability to obtain higher paying jobs. You know, as I mentioned, these really go hand in hand. If you don't have a good educational background, it does limit the type of job that you're able to get to bring in a higher level of income to help support your family. So if your income level is at poverty or even below, it makes it very difficult for you to be able to have the things that you need to remain healthy, even paying premiums for insurance or getting prescriptions, pharmaceuticals. All of those things come at a cost. Poor nutrition leads to multiple health complications. If you're unable to purchase and have the food on hand that is nutritious and healthy, it can lead to health complications, especially if you have other comorbidities such as diabetes. If you don't purchase the foods that help you to eat a healthy, well-balanced diet to keep your blood glucose in check, then this can impact you in a multitude of ways. Polluted air and unclean water leading to multiple health problems. That's a given. If your air is unclean, if your water is unclean, and these are things that you're ingesting into your body, it's obviously going to impact your health in a negative way. And then limited access to physical activity and sedentary lifestyle, those will impact your health in a negative way as well. You know, first of all, let's just talk about mental health for starters. You know, physical activity is one of the things that helps to boost your mental health. It improves your mood, it boosts your mental health, but not only does it do that, it also helps your cardiac health. It helps a multitude of things. And so having limited access to these things does impact your life. Social determinants of health in the elderly. The social determinants of health, they're really intermingled with each variable impacting or affecting the aging population age 65 and above. Things like economic security, those are essential for the elderly to cover health costs, housing expenses, transportation, and just overall monthly living expenses. You know, as mentioned before, pharmaceuticals fall into this. They have to have money to be able to cover their prescriptions. So all of these things, if they don't have an economic security, it impacts all of those areas of their life. Living alone puts the elderly at a higher risk to be socially disconnected, which can lead to depression. You know, a lot of times when you reach that elderly age, you see several folks who are widowed and living alone, or maybe they have had a divorce earlier in life and so they're living alone, or maybe they've never married and that's been the norm for them. But when they reach those elderly years, it can put them at higher risk and lead to depression. The elderly's ability to thrive can be influenced greatly by home and community. If the elderly are fortunate enough to have a very involved family and they're, they come around often and they get the individual and bring them out to family events, or if they live in a high-rise community where it's a very active community and there's lots of things going on and they're able to be involved in that, that can help them to thrive and it can impact their health in a positive way. And then health literacy is impacted by an elderly's level of education. Depending on what they understand about what's going on with them physically, what their disease process is, how well do they understand it, and how well do they understand how to treat it and to do the things that are going to impact it in a positive way. If there's someone that has a diagnosis of CHF, do they understand what's necessary for them to be able to help reduce edema and the extra fluid and pressure around the heart? Do they understand how sodium affects that? What foods are sodium high in? Things like that, that their health literacy impacts in terms of their level of education. And then the social determinants of health that impact the nutritional status of the elderly. Access to nutritional, affordable food is essential for the elderly to live healthy lives. If they don't have the ability to afford healthy food, if they have to determine, do they pay the rent this month, do they pay their electric bill this month, or do they spend that money on nutritional, healthy food, chances are the food is going to go to the bottom burner and things like the rent and the electricity bill are going to be paid first. And as a result, their nutrition lacks, which can impact their health physically. The financial ability to afford the nutritious food is essential, as we just talked about. If they don't have the finances to be able to afford that food, or they don't know the resources that's available to help them with those finances, then they suffer with their health because they're not receiving the nutrition that they need. And also, they have to have an educational level that allows them to understand what foods are nutritious and imperative for their age to remain healthy. As I talked about on the previous slide with CHF, in trying to avoid that sodium, do they understand what foods are high in sodium? They may think that they're eating a nutritious meal because they've got a can of soup that is maybe a beef stew. But what they don't realize is that beef stew, that can of beef stew, is very high in sodium. So having the education level to understand what they need to look at when they're looking towards purchasing healthy food, all of those things are imperative for them to have a positive health outcome. And this concludes my presentation on the social determinants of health and how they impact our elderly population. Thank you for your time.